Pay close attention. What you're about to see is Bible prophecy being fulfilled.
Welcome to another edition of YPN News, bringing you news as it relates to Bible prophecy and foretold by Yisrael Hawkins. We have some graphic images of war. France is joining in on airstrikes. The countries of the European Union are begging for money for migrants, and Israel is bringing forth some attacks on the Golan Heights. And these are just a few of the articles showing the results of the love grown cold throughout the world. Now, we start off today with an interview on 60 Minutes Overtime. Scott Pelly discussed his decision to show graphic images of the atrocities of wars, saying these things happen all too often in this world because people don't see them and don't know why sarin, referring to sarin gas attacks, is banned by almost every country on earth.
He continued, "We wanted the world to see what this was in all its ugliness. It killed more than 1,000 people, over 400 children. People can read about that all day, but if you don't see it, I don't believe the impact truly hits you."
Yeah. Now, in an interview, the statement was made concerning how times have changed in reporting war crimes. Pelly responded, "What would have happened during the Holocaust if all the Jews had cell phones? Well, certainly the world would have found out much sooner than what was happening. We've never seen anything like the sarin gas attacks in Damascus," and he emphasized the word seen and the fact that these atrocities happen and keep happening because we don't see it take place.
Now, a reservoir in Northern California all of a sudden ran dry, killing thousands of fish and leaving residents scratching their heads for answers. The reservoir, called Mountain Meadow, also known as Walker Lake, residents were just fishing at the lake a Saturday before, and by the following Saturday, it drained like a bathtub. And by the next day, on Sunday, it looked pretty parched. Now, the smell is awful, said one resident who lived next to the lake all his life. And this is the first time he's ever seen the lake run dry.
Oh, I bet thousands and thousands of fish just lying on there, rotting in the sun. That's got to be difficult to tolerate. Pacific Gas and Electric owns the rights to the water and uses it for hydroelectric power. Paul Moreno, a spokesman for PG&E, said it's a situation we worked hard to avoid, but the situation is we're in a very serious drought, and we're also concerned for the fish downstream. He also said there should have been at least 2 more weeks of water left, and that would have given them enough time to relocate the fish. Obviously, that was not the case.
Now, while some residents think that PG&E just opened the dam and let all the water out, officials at the plant say that wasn't the case. The water simply just dried up. In fact, Doug Carlson with the Department of Water Resources said all the reservoirs across the region are drying up. And Katan, of course, that's got to be a concern for the residents of California because they're already in this drought and now they're having more reservoirs drying up.
That's right. Pretty frustrating situation over there. Well, in Syrian news, a Syrian watchdog has reported that the United States has sent 75 more U.S.-trained rebels into Syria. They were trained in the program that we recently reported was based in Turkey, and that program has a $500 million budget. Despite such an enormous budget, the results are disappointing, and they're disappointing many on Capitol Hill, especially since there's only a handful of those soldiers that are actually trained or have completed that training, that being 9 of 54. So these are another group of soldiers, but the training program that was supposed to produce these $500 million men, so to speak, hasn't done so.
Wow. Well, U.S. citizens are also wanting to do their part to fight terrorism here and abroad. One such Florida arms dealer modified an assault rifle with the purpose of no Muslim being able to fire it. He named his new weapon the Crusader.
Oh, that's interesting. Now, the Crusader is designed with Christian symbols on them, crosses and so forth, with the hopes of stopping Muslims from using them to target Christians. The owner said, "I want a gun where if a Muslim terrorist grabbed hold of it," and these are his words, "a bolt of lightning knocks him dead on the spot." Well, I don't know how that would occur, but he even had Bible verses engraved on the weapons. One such verse is Psalms 144:1, and he says his message is to remind people that the Christian Crusaders saved the world from darkness by defeating the Muslim army.
Now, Katan, if you remember properly, Yisrael Hawkins has taught us through the historical references that the Crusades were actually initiated by the Catholic Church, and history has it the other way around.
Right.
They say that the Christians were the one targeted, but actually the Christians were targeting those people that had any form of holiness, meaning they followed some of the laws written in the Bible,
Right.
and they were the ones, these Crusades, that brought about the darkness on the world.
Yeah, a totally different story.
Wow.
Well, the rifle has 3 settings: peace, which is safety and the gun won't fire; war, which is 1 bullet every time you squeeze the trigger; and God wills it, which is, of course, the fully automatic function.
Wow. Well, Brussels is demanding money from EU members to assist with refugees coming from the Middle East. Now to the UN agencies, 1 billion euros has been pledged to those groups working in the region. In fact, the issue of money has been a sensitive one for the EU states, so much so the EU's foreign policy chief, Federica Mogherini, showed anger when talking about the lack of contributions.
Addressing EU members, she said Germany is contributing by 5 million euros, Italy is contributing by 3 million euros, and that's it. We have to start being consistent. Now, she later apologized for getting emotional and added, sometimes we need it. In addition to providing aid for asylum seekers, EU countries are also responsible for providing benefits to the refugees as well.
In Europe, refugees are offered 200 euros per month plus housing. In Germany, they get about 140 euros, while welcome centers take care of their food and housing. But in France, they get up to 718 euros per month, depending on their family size.
That's right. While Western European states were pleased with the results of the summit, Eastern states like Hungary were far from optimistic about the outcome. Viktor Orban, Hungary's prime minister, said, "We have been unable to reach an agreement on defending the Greek borders together if Greece is unable to do it alone. This is a shame, as it is the most important of all the proposals."
He continued, "In this sense, Europe's external border is still not protected, and the migrants breaking international agreements continue to come through Greece."
Recently, more than 10,000 refugees entered Hungary, mostly through Croatia, which is a new record. After Hungary closed its borders with Serbia, thousands of refugees went to Croatia instead, and as a result, the Croatian government started busing them to the Hungarian border. The majority of refugees are trying to make it to Western Europe. They're not even interested in staying in Hungary. They're just using it as a throughway. But Hungary is saying, no way. Find another route.
Well, continuing our coverage, Larry, it appears that another country has joined the fight against ISIL. Who is it this time, and can you give us an update on the rest of the countries that are fighting the Islamic State?
France is the latest nation to lend its military arm to the increasing roster of nations somehow involved in the conflict in Syria. The latest attack by the French was executed against ISIS in coordination with what's being called France's regional partners and comes on the heels of its recent decision to expand its bombings in Iraq. A U.S.-led coalition force is performing strikes in both Iraq and Syria, but the French have chose to limit their efforts to the Iraqi region. Analysts have so far labeled the campaign a failure, with political leaders such as Georges Debout, the president of the Syrian UN Association, commenting further yet that the activities of France have been a violation of international law. According to Debout, the French should have coordinated their efforts with the Syrian government, since it is the Syrian government that is the legitimate government of the country, whose governing authority and sovereignty is recognized by the UN. But of course, the association president said, "We know that the UN is not active in protecting Syrian sovereignty at this time." Meanwhile, ISIS insurgents are quickly advancing on the Kurdish border town of Kobani. Video is now circulating on the internet demonstrating the intensity of the fighting, with ISIS militants making every effort, according to reports, to remove all traces of the Syrian Kurds who occupy the town. This includes removing images of their leadership, with the result that yet another mass of thousands of people have been forced to flee Syria in search for peace and safety. From Turkey, refugees confirmed that they were being attacked by ISIS insurgents. It's a war out there, they say. They were advancing, so we had to flee. Our children are devastated and starving. While willing to help, Turkish officials are said to be concerned that the crisis will only get worse. What does appear to be getting better, however, is international opinion for President Assad. This week, many European officials began softening their stance on the embattled leader, including German Chancellor Angela Merkel, who says that President Assad must be involved in any talks aimed at ending the conflict in Syria. Shockingly, the Chancellor of Europe's largest economy also stated that Iran and Saudi Arabia are important regional partners which Berlin needs to talk to concerning the crisis in Syria. The Russian bear is apparently already making strides in that direction. At a press conference this week, Russian and Iranian officials announced a collective intention to work closely together to find solutions to the violent conflicts currently raging throughout the region of the Tigris and Euphrates. Iran's deputy minister was recently in Moscow to consult with Russia's deputy foreign minister concerning a peace plan which Iran has proposed for Syria. The Iranian minister expressed loyalty on behalf of both nations for the legitimate and democratically elected government of Syria and pledged to use all of its means to help Damascus to come out of its crisis. The duo also expressed concern over the chaos mounting in Yemen, and while Tehran is not currently militarily involved in the conflict, it is said to be providing aid to countries facing serious threats of terror. For YPN News, I'm Larry McGee. Katan Jeff, back to you.
Well, after all these talks, it still doesn't seem like the nations are set towards truly achieving peace, except through their own means, which appears to be war, continual war. Well, as we continue our coverage in and around the Great River Euphrates, Israel has launched airstrikes and artillery attacks on Syrian army posts. The Israeli government said these attacks are in response to rocket fire from the Golan Heights. 4 rockets landed in the Upper Galilee region in the Israeli-occupied parts of the Golan Heights. No one was injured in the rocket attacks. However, several fires were started as a result. Israel has been accused of backing militants fighting against the Syrian government.
Well, after spending 10 years rebuilding, Russia's biggest mosque has reopened in Moscow with several Middle East leaders attending the event. The mosque is now one of the largest in Europe and can accommodate 10,000 worshipers. The opening ceremony was attended by presidents of Russia, Turkey, Palestine, Kazakhstan, Azerbaijan, and Kyrgyzstan, as well as ambassadors from several countries.
The president of the Council of Muftis of Russia, Rawil Gan-Yitun, stressed the importance of the event. This is a historic moment that will strengthen peace and brotherhood between countries, peoples, and cultures. We are grateful to all who helped to build this mosque.
Well, at the opening ceremony, short speeches were delivered by the presidents of Russia, Turkey, and Palestine. Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas condemned Israel's aggression against his people and called on the international community to ensure the protection of Muslims and Palestinian Christians in Jerusalem and other holy sites by saying, "We strongly condemn any act of occupation by the Israeli authorities to prohibit access to the holy mosque Al-Aqsa." And if you remember, Katan, they just had all that fighting take place there, so of course that's still fresh on everyone's mind.
That's right. Well, Russian President Vladimir Putin also spoke at the big event. "From my heart, I congratulate you all," he said, "for the opening of the renovated Moscow Mosque. This is a great event for Russian Muslims." The Russian president continued, "We can see what's happening in the Middle East now, where terrorists from the so-called Islamic State compromise the great world religion of Islam by killing people. Their ideology is based on lies, on the obvious distortion of Islam."
All leaders that attended the event seemed to stress that this new mosque has a role to play, that it must support and preach true Islamic values and combat more extreme interpretations that are coming forth from groups like Islamic State. Now, many feel Moscow is becoming a headquarters when it comes to fighting ISIS. Russia has been pushing the idea that there needs to be a radical change and everybody needs to come together into a huge coalition against the Islamic State.
Interesting. Now, the Russian president is not the only one that shares these beliefs. After a UN summit in New York, Egypt's president says the states in the Middle East need to cooperate to defeat increasing threats from extremists. Abdel Fattah el-Sisi told the Associated Press the terrorist threats has led to a furious war in Egypt. The 60-year-old former military chief, who assumed office in 2014 after the army ousted his predecessor, Mohamed Morsi, said every country needs to put in a lot of effort in order to improve security and stability in the Middle East.
President el-Sisi covered a wide range of issues in the interview, saying Syria should not be divided or partitioned and that he is optimistic about creating peace between Israel and the Palestinians. The president also spoke about the need to stabilize and rebuild countries that are sliding into a vicious cycle of failure. And all of that, Katan, as a result, like he mentioned, because of the wars that are taking place, his country is suffering greatly as well.
That's right, that ripple effect.
Absolutely.
That's right. Well, lastly in the news, Pope Francis. Pictures from the Pope's recent visit to the United States continue to surface. Images of the leader of the world's religions waving at crowds, trying to get as close as he can to the people that admire him the most, the Catholic Church. Well, called by many the People's Pope, Pope Francis can be seen wherever he goes, kissing babies and calling the lame and diseased to his presence.
However, no amount of kissing and waving of hands can help those men, women, and children who are suffering from the wars and results of those wars waging in the world today. As CBS anchorman Scott Pelly said, you can read about these terrible things all day, but if you don't see it, the impact truly doesn't hit you. Israel Hawkins, overseer of the House of Yahweh, has said that the only way to stop all wars is to teach the laws of peace found in the Holy Scriptures. So as Pope Francis is saying, who am I to judge? Israel Hawkins says, judge for yourself. See if the choices mankind is making is bringing peace to this earth. No amount of outward flattery will change the hearts and minds of mankind. As Yeshua Hawkins says, only through the education of moral laws will mankind have peace. Now, to see for yourself the deadly effects of war, check out the 60 Minutes program entitled A Crime Against Humanity. And to see for yourself the effects of righteousness and the teachings thereof, check out the House of Yahweh. Contact them today, request your free Prophetic Word magazine and monthly newsletter. You can also download hundreds of sermons given by Yeshua Hawkins, packed full of information that is guaranteed to leave you saying, wow.
Well, to contact the House of Yahweh, you can write them at the House of Yahweh, P.O. Box 2498, Abilene, Texas 79604. You can call them at 1-800-613-9494. Visit them on any of their websites at www.yahweh.com, www.yeshuahawkins.com, or www.yahwehsbranch.com. You can also check out our new website at www.ypnnews.com. And to email the House of Yahweh, send your emails to info@yahweh.com. And for any calls outside the United States, please call the number on your screen.
Well, grab a notebook and a pen or pencil. Up next is Yeshua Hawkins. From all of us here at YPN News, I'm Jeffrey Heimerman.
And I'm Katan Alexander.
Thanks for watching.